Welcome to Taking the Higher Road, a podcast by DriverReach in partnership with FreightWaves. I'm your host, Jeremy Reymer, founder of DriverReach, a modern software solution at the intersection of recruiting and compliance. With over 20 years in the trucking industry, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side, I bring a wealth of expertise around all things recruiting, retention, and compliance. And on this show, I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges from recruitment and retention to the realm of regulatory compliance. Your positive feedback keeps us motivated, so don't forget to rate and review Taking the High Road on whatever platform you use to listen. This week, I'm thrilled to be joined by someone whose popularity has increased significantly based on the problem he's helping to solve. Evan Shelley, co-founder and CEO of Truck Parking Club. So glad to have you on the show, Evan. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, you're a truck parking expert with a deep knowledge of the business. I'd certainly like to hear your story. What got you into the industry? What was your motivation for addressing this increasingly challenging issue? I'm excited to hear about the origins of Truck Parking Club and hear how your innovative approach is making a difference. I'd also like to hear your thoughts on the future of truck parking as you're reinventing how drivers are finding and securing parking spots across the country, leveraging technology in the process. Plus, I'll make sure we save some time from a question from a listener during our deeper dive segment. Does that all work for you?
Yeah, that sounds great.
It's a lot to unpack. So before we dive in, I am curious if there are any book, recommendations that you may have for the audience. Anything recent you've read that was maybe impactful to you?
Yeah, my thing with picking my favorite book a lot of times is it's almost always my most recent book that I've read, and I'm currently finishing a book called Blitzscaling. I'm a big Audible guy, so I listen to audiobooks, but it's a super interesting book. But as far as ones that stick in my head, I think Sam Walton's book, Made in America, is an excellent book. Steve Jobs' book's really good too. I like biographies and autobiographies a lot. So I would say those two. I really enjoy those.
Is it Reed Hastings? Is that who it was for Blitzscaling?
Reed Hoffman.
Hoffman, Hoffman. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I think there was 3 or 4 authors in total, but I think Reed was the main one that wrote it. But excellent book.
Yeah.
Excellent. I don't know how it gotten past me for so long, and then finally I saw it again. I'd heard about it before, but then I was like, I have to listen to this, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think I listened to that one sometime within the last year, finally. Same thing. I've had it. Like I have a lot of books. I like to buy books and then finally eventually get around to reading them. And I do Audible a lot. So
Yeah.
I have a bad habit of buying the physical book and listening to it on Audible.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. Amazon, you're welcome. So to kick things off, I guess, really to get into Truck Parking Club, if you could share with our listeners a bit about your journey and how you became so deeply involved in the world of truck parking and real estate.
Yeah, so, about the time I was graduating college, I'd always been kind of in and around real estate, grew up with a family that owned, a couple rental properties and got around it that way. And at that point, I'd bought 1 or 2 rental properties through using partners. And as I was graduating school, I went out and worked for a couple contractors. I had a civil engineering degree, so I went and worked for some contractors and, enjoyed working for them, but finally determined that after 18 months or so that I wanted to go out on my own. And I went out and started flipping houses and fortunately was in Florida, which is a great market for it. And the market kept getting better and better. And as I was flipping those houses, I started trying to figure out how to do bigger and bigger deals and kind of stumbled into a land deal, which got me into land development. And from there, a few years into that, I came across a land deal that was zoned industrial. And my thought was I was going to take this piece of property and develop it into truck parking because everyone I had talked to, this is in 2021, everyone I had talked to said that there was a huge demand for truck parking and there wasn't enough of it. And these are people, brokers, other investors, things of that nature. And So I went to that municipality and I said, I want to put truck parking here, and I'm going to start going through the process of getting zoning and permitting, everything tied up in a bow. And they're like, we're not going to allow it here. There's commercial down the road. Those residents aren't going to like it. And they're like, we're just not going to support it at a city level. And I was like, that's interesting, because it was a good spot for it. There wasn't much, there wasn't a ton of truck parking anywhere within, a several mile radius. There was one or two locations. There was actually one right next door, but that also kind of made me understand the dynamics of like politics and stuff. But with that being said, that got me thinking about what is actually going on here. And this is in, early 2021. And so over the next 12 months from there, I just started getting to know a lot of people in the industry, and a lot of people in not just truck parking, but also just in logistics in general, and started going to a lot of conferences, FreightWaves events, things of that nature, and just connecting with a lot of people in the industry. And through that course of time, realized I thought I was just going to go out and buy truck parking, because being a real estate background. But ultimately, I realized truck parking is extremely difficult to scale, because operationally, I mean, you have to be a master of operations to scale outside of, maybe 10 or so properties. Once you get outside maybe a regional grasp, it becomes extremely difficult. So fortunately, I never bought any truck parking locations, the real estate behind it or anything, and kept trying to figure out how to get into it, and came across, after a lot of conversations, Truck Parking Club on, hey, let's leverage technology and let's leverage existing space to then create more truck parking. So it's a really value add on two sides of a marketplace, where we help truckers find the parking they need, but we also help property owners with empty properties. And that can be a trucking company with extra space, that can be a storage company, that can be a trailer leasing company. We have home builders with big yards that have extra space. So that's really, that's the story.
So that first of all, I didn't. It's unfortunate that you ran into some of the resistance that you did, and some of the politics that you had to deal with. For some people, for some entrepreneurs like you, that could have been enough of a deterrent to just push you somewhere else. But fortunately, you had the grit to get through that and see the vision for something, bigger, and especially addressing a problem that, you're right, it is a big issue. In fact, I'm sure you know this, you probably tell this story as well, but I know I'm pretty active in the industry, and I've been on ATRI's research advisory committee, where and every year when ATRI puts out their annual survey, they indicate that truck parking is generally, at least from a driver's perspective, number one or number two issue years in a row. And so from that perspective, for companies that care about addressing their drivers' needs, they should be trying to address this problem. You're certainly doing that squarely. You seem to have drawn some inspiration, I'm guessing, from innovative models like Airbnb. Maybe can you walk us through kind of how did it shift more towards technology as the focus? Did you just recognizing that, kind of to your point, you can't scale the way that you'd really want to without leveraging technology and leveraging the available space that is probably all over the place if you can find it? Is that kind of how that evolution came to be for you?
Yeah, it was, understanding really what was needed, and really the biggest need is just more space. And you can go the route of traditional real estate development, which I know from my career can be long, tedious, and can be very expensive. And talk about operationally scaling, extremely, extremely difficult. The core competencies you need to develop anything in real estate is very, very high to be successful. And so I kind of wrote that one off, and it was a hot real estate market, fortunately. So I couldn't just go out and buy a bunch of real estate at prices that made really any sense to myself, or any of my investors. So then you think, okay, and I had conversations with people. I have friends in technology that would bring it up, like, there's space out there, right? Like, just let a trucker know that there's space over there in that parking lot, and he can reserve that space. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, I dismissed it early on back in like 2021. I dismissed it. But as I continued talking with people, I realized that this was something that leveraging technology did make a lot of sense. Um, but on top of leveraging that technology, now you have to educate consumers, and that's, you mentioned Airbnb, and I have a ton of respect for what they did, because I think it is an extremely difficult road to have to change human nature a little, in a way. I know with like what Airbnb did, extremely difficult, and what we're doing, truckers aren't used to going on an app and booking truck parking at a carrier's location on the other side of the U.S. But now we're starting to educate truckers that this is possible and it works, and it's seamless. And in the beginning, it's a lot of education, and it's a lot of open-minded people giving it a chance, and then as the business having to perform and making sure that these customers have a good experience. Because if you have enough bad experiences early on, you're going to die in the process, really in that death valley of trying to get enough people on board, enough momentum to then make it to the next level of growth. And it was extremely difficult in the beginning.
Now, what are you doing now? What's your outreach like? Because maybe you can share what kind of businesses you're targeting. What's the selling point? That sort of how are you getting both interested parties, i.e., carriers and or drivers, as well as how are you finding property? How are you finding space?
Yeah. So I would say really our motto is be everywhere. I know that doesn't answer your question very well,
No,
but
but I will say before you finish, you are everywhere. I just this conversation, obviously, but I know I see you and I see Truck Parking Club uh, doing a fantastic job of being vocal, sharing your story on numerous shows, podcasts, articles in various publications. So that's great. You're certainly getting it out there. So what are you doing?
yeah. I mean, podcasts, articles through what we call is mainstream trucker media, but then also we do grassroots, go to a lot of trucking shows, go to a lot of conferences. So not only digital, but also in person. And then you get, that awareness out there, right? But that's only one part of it. That's only one part of really the experience. Then you have to perform, right? So someone, we meet someone at a truck show, and they're like, oh, this is interesting. It's cool talking to them. Next time they're out on the road, they pull out the app. Do we have a location near them? Okay, check, we do. Great. Now, is their experience with the app going well? Okay, great. Check. So, and then you have to get through that funnel without, losing that customer, right? So, for us on the marketing side, it is be everywhere, but that's just one piece.
How do you find space?
It's really the same thing. I mean, so when we go, to shows, we go to truck shows. Remember that we have trucking companies with extra spaces in their yard. So we may talk with a carrier or a small fleet that has a yard enough for 20 trucks, but they only have 10. So then we get 10 spaces from them in Iowa or wherever. So I mean, that's part of it too. I mean, Yeah, I mean, between social media, podcasts, um, articles through mainstream trucker media, and just really trying to be on every channel is really it. Yeah, and also actually we do some outbound too, but I would say it's like 10% of what we do. Where we have a van and we'll take certain routes where we think there's a need for parking, and we'll go find parking out there. Um, so that is another way that um, we try to go and get more properties.
Is it a fine balance between, you certainly want to have enough demand, drivers needing a place to park. You also want to make sure you always have enough supply, right, of spaces. Is that a constant balancing act for you?
Yeah, I would say so. If you have, let's say you have a ton of truckers hit your app or website, and then they don't have anywhere to park, or that you don't have locations that are convenient for them, then yeah, you may have just lost a customer. So it is a balancing act in a way. Um, I would say, especially in the beginning, it was extremely difficult when we had 20 properties or 30 properties. It was extremely difficult. It's becoming a little bit easier now, but
So you mentioned an app. So there's a downloadable app that drivers they can download. Do they create an account? What's that process like for the driver? And then I'll ask the same thing about especially a carrier, for example, that might be providing a space. Kind of what's their incentive? But back to the driver real quick. What's that process like for the app?
yeah, so you can go to the Google or Apple App Store and download the app. And at that point, let's say you find a place in Dallas, location in Dallas, so you want to book, you would create an account. We ask for two or three things: first name, last name, email, optional phone number. Um, and then from there, you would just go through the booking process. Typically, the first time a trucker books, it takes 3 or so minutes. And then after your first time booking, we really strive toward that Amazon effect, where it's almost, so actually it's like 3 clicks at this point. So it's about 30 seconds for your second time booking, and every time after that, assuming that your equipment hasn't changed. So we make it a very seamless experience.
There's a cost. I assume there's a cost associated with booking a space.
The uh, so we have 150 locations that are paid currently. So let's say you want to book something for 2 days in Dallas and it's $20 per day. That would be $40 to you flat.
Mm-hmm.
We do not add any transaction fees to truckers for their booking. So the number is the number. I know Airbnb got in a lot of trouble for adding quite a bit of expenses by the time you actually book through their platform, which we're very focused on not adding any transaction fees to the trucker side of it. But we also have 143 rest stops all across the U.S. Well, actually across 8 states in the U.S. that shows real-time availability at rest stops for free truck parking. We rolled that out 2 weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's a free service on the app.
Now, from a carrier's perspective, let's say I'm a carrier. I've got, as you shared, 20 spaces, but I've got 10 trucks. So I've got room for 10. And I say, hey, I'm interested. What's the pitch to them to say, how do I get you our space, and what is their incentive? Especially in this economic time, I would imagine they're always looking for ways to maybe generate revenue or operate more efficiently.
Yeah, so our process for what we call property members takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they can do it directly through truckparkingclub.com. They just go to the site, they click add your location in the top right-hand corner, and then it will walk you through the steps. We have people every single day from all over the U.S. add their locations right through the app. But we also do have a property intake team that can walk you through adding your location on the platform, or if you have any questions.
And are they do they get to choose what they charge, or how does that work? Or is it it's always going to be a certain amount if there is a charge?
So it's just like Airbnb.
I got you.
We don't require a certain price. We just make suggestions.
And you're really playing matchmaker here. It's sort of the chocolate and peanut butter commercial that I remember as a kid. It's a perfect fit. You're trying to help get them together. So I'm curious, before we get into the deeper dive question, just how would you recommend motor carriers get involved with truck driver or with truck parking club in general? Like, what would you recommend? What's the pitch for carriers, especially in light of knowing that drivers are having such a hard time?
Yeah, I would just say, what's your downside? We don't charge you anything to be on the platform. So let's say you use 20 minutes total to get your location on the platform. That is what you've put into it. And there's a possibility that you're helping a trucker find parking if you get a booking, right? So we're not tying you up, encumbering your property with a lease. We're not forcing you to commit to be on the platform for any amount of time. And it doesn't cost you anything to be on the platform. And ultimately, it is very likely it will help you monetize that extra space. It's very likely that you're going to make money on that. So your downside is 20 minutes in the process in total. So we think it's a great fit for really any carrier, any business owner with extra space. We have bull haulers with extra space, like I mentioned, home builders with extra space. So anyone that has a yard that is adequate for parking trucks, we think is a great fit.
So that's probably a good segue into this deeper dive question, which is a question submitted by a listener. And the question is, I know that truck parking is a major issue for drivers. Are carriers embracing truck parking solutions as a way to improve recruiting and retention? That's a question that's been asked a number of times. So it's a resurfaced question, specifically since I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I definitely think carriers are embracing it. I know we get approached often by carriers all across the U.S. That are saying, where do you have locations now? Our guys run these lanes. Do you have anything for them? We think it's an obvious tool in the tool belt for a trucker to have, and I think it's something great that a carrier can mention to their drivers, that they're going to be able to have just another way to pre-trip, to plan, to reserve ahead, to know they have a place to drop a trailer. You would be surprised how often we meet someone at a truck show and they're like, man, I would have made X number of thousands of dollars if I had known about you last week, because I could have dropped a trailer there, ran that load, and came back and got that trailer. So we think it's a great tool in the tool belt.
Yeah, no question, and I really look forward to seeing how this continues to grow and blossom. You're helping solve a pretty big issue. Certainly appreciate you joining us today. I appreciate your dedication to solving this issue, and I look forward to seeing your continued success.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jeremy.
And thanks for joining me for another episode of Taking the High Road, and for spreading the word to your industry peers. We really appreciate it. Remember, you can submit any question or comments, including those which may appear on upcoming deeper dive segments, at podcast@driverreach.com. And don't forget to rate and review Taking the Higher Road, whatever platform you use to listen. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.